Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 10 Worst Episodes of Modern Trek. So this is the second video in a series I'm doing where I'm rating the best and the worst episodes of modern Star Trek. And I'll explain, as I did in the previous video, that I'm defining modern Star Trek as anything that came out in 2010s and onwards, from Discovery onwards. I'm not calling it New Trek, especially spelling it N-U, because I think that's dumb. I think it's modern Star Trek because this is the modern era. It's modern day makes sense to me. Anyway, I also want to make clear, as I did in the other video, that I am not one of those people who hate absolutely everything that came out in the past 10 years and thinks everything Robert Kurtzman touches or has his name on is a complete and other piece of shit, and that they're ruining Star Trek, or like one of those morons who say Star Trek got woke, which it always was. I'm sorry. But anyway, no, so I'm not one of those people. I don't hate everything new, and I do want to emphasize that you should watch my video I did on my top 20 best episodes of Star Trek, because as I explained in that video, I think there is more good than bad in the modern era of Star Trek, and that's why I did 20 for the best episodes and only 10 for the worst, because I think there's more good than bad, and I don't want to be confused with someone who just trashes everything that came out after 2015 and said everything, all of Discovery and Picard is total shit. I'm not one of those people, but on the other hand, I also don't like the other extreme that thinks that everything is golden, that everything with the name Star Trek on it must be pure gold and untouchable, and if you say one bad word about it, you are a hater. That's the other extreme that I also don't agree with, which is why I'm, in addition to doing a top 20 best, I'm also going to do a top 10 worst, because I got to take the good with the bad. You know, everyone has an opinion of what is good and what is bad, like different opinions on that, that's fine, but just, you know, acknowledge that there is good and bad and everything's not all awesome or all shitty. Anyway, particularly I did note with particular shows like Discovery and Picard, I think we're in particular a mixed bag. So some of it really good, some of it really bad. And I talked about what was really good before, so now I'm here to talk about what is really bad. Now, the other thing I should mention is I was hesitant to do a top 10 worst at first, because I could just simply say Picard Season 2, all 10 episodes are the 10 worst episodes of Modern Trek. And that would actually be fair, a fair assessment of my opinion. But I decided to be a little more nuanced than that, because there were some terrible episodes from the other shows as well. So I thought it would only be fair if I included those as well. However, you will find that this top 10 does favor that certain season of Modern Trek. Anywho, let's go ahead and get started with my top 10 worst episodes of Modern Trek, and we'll start with my number 10, which is All In, Discovery Season 4, Episode 8. So they left off, this was the mid-season premiere, and they left off the mid-season finale with a great episode, which you'll actually find over in my best list, where they created this tension between, you know, Book and Burnham, who are lovers, and now they were at odds and literally fighting against each other on opposite sides. And so I was like, wow, this is an amazing setup. And so I couldn't wait to see how they handle this. And how do they handle it? They go to a casino and play poker while this nothing character, bridge crew, wrestles and does like a wrestling match. And then for no reason, like, these villains show up out of nowhere, and Burnham and Book like team up to defeat them. Where the fuck did these people come from? And they had this guy that they were trying so hard to make like Quark. It was just a terrible episode. I didn't like it. So anyway, let's move over to my number 9, which is Point of Light, Discovery Season 2, Episode 3. This is the worst episode of Season 2 of Discovery by far. This is the Klingon episode that brought up, because I kind of like the Ash Tyler storyline in Season 1, but they were really unclear on what his relation to Voq was and what the deal with him with Voq is. He Voq disguised as Ash Tyler? Like, they never really explained that. And so this episode dealt with Ash Tyler trying to be Voq on the Kronos with the Klingon R'Lel and their weird relationship, and they pretended to kill their baby or some shit. I don't know. It was really, like, the way Discovery handled Klingons was definitely one of the worst aspects of the show. Not just the way they look, although that's terrible enough, but also the way they act and behave, and the way they say Kahless. It's fucking Kahless, not Kalish. Bullshit. Anyway, terrible episode. As sort of highlight how Discovery mishandled the Klingons. So next we will move over to my number 8, which is Mercy from Picard Season 2, Episode 8. So this is the episode where Picard and Guinan get drilled by Discount Fox Mulder, and as he makes the deduction that they're aliens based off of practically nothing. And you know what? They kind of deserved it, though, because Picard decided, and his crew were just beaming in, transporting into, 2024 LA in the middle of the fucking street, in the middle of public. Like, what the hell is wrong with these people? Anyway, and then Q shows up and does some of this riddle shit that doesn't even make any sense. And I don't know, this show is a mess by this point anyway. So, next we will move over to my number 7. We will always have Tom Paris, Lower Decks, Season 2, Episode 3. Now look, I love Lower Decks, and in fact there's 3 plots in this episode. One of them's actually pretty good, having to do with Mariner and Tendi going off and trying to find something, get us something for Dr. Hana that turns out to be a sex toy, and they have to pretend to be pirates, and Mariner goes, "Arr!" Like, that's funny. Although it was a bit silly when they did the whole thing with the Orion Pirates, when they already said that was a stereotype that Tendi didn't fit into, but whatever. I still thought it was a decent storyline, but the other 2 storylines were crap. We get the storyline with Boimler trying to find Tom Paris, and this computer just stops recognizing and the doors don't open for him, which isn't a thing. Like, that wouldn't happen, and they really stretch it to try to make it so Boimler doesn't get to meet up with Tom Paris. And they call the episode "We'll Always Have Tom Paris," and they make a big deal about Tom Paris guest starring, but he's barely in the fucking thing, so it felt like a major letdown. But of course, the real reason why this is on the top 10 worst list is the storyline where they bring Shax back from the dead with no fucking explanation whatsoever and try to play it off as a joke, like as if this happens in Star Trek all the time when a character dies and then comes back to life in a later episode or later movie, when in fact it happened only once. You could stretch it and say like different version of Tasha Yar or different version of Dax, but that's kind of stretching it, where this isn't a different version of Shax. This is Shax, so I would say that it only one time it ever happened, and yet this episode is playing it off like it happened all the Star Trek all the fucking time, which is bullshit. But here's the thing. I was really open with Shax coming back to life, and when them bringing Shax back to life. In fact, I wanted them to do it, but I wanted them to do it in a clever way that sort of maybe parodied Star Trek 3, where this is the opposite of a clever way. This is a lazy way, where they just refuse to admit it and make some joke about, when Shax explains it to Rutherford, he's horrified, and there was a mountain and blah, blah, blah. To me, this is the laziest writing I've ever seen. It's some of the laziest writing I've seen in Modern Trek, and I expect more from Lower Decks, which is usually very clever and funny. So it really made, in retrospect, made me really hate Shaq's death. What they pulled out was really emotional. But Spock's death in Wrath of Khan was really emotional too. And his resurrection did not undermine that at all. But this, since they were so lazy with it, definitely does undermine the season 1 finale. So, yes, I definitely had to say this is one of the worst episodes of Modern Trek. So, next, we will get into my number 6, which is The Watcher, Picard Season 2, Episode 4. So, this is the episode where we're introduced to young Guinan, who's played by a different actress, which I have no issue with. Casting a different actress to play a younger version of Guinan makes more sense than trying to de-age Whoopi Goldberg. And the actress they got to play her, fine actress, no issue with that. Problem is, she's acting absolutely nothing like Guinan. Like, this is not the same character in any way, shape, or form. She's really pissy and angry, and it seems like it goes along with everyone's stereotype of Modern Trek of having to be all angsty and angry and pissy and pissed off and angry at everything instead of feeling like Star Trek. And so it feeds into that stereotype, which I don't agree with, but of course is this episode proves holds true in some cases. And the fact that this Picard Season 2 in particular had been referencing very heavily, mind you, other works of Star Trek in previous episodes, and yet this episode completely forgets that the episode Time's Error exists, where Picard and Guinan had already met each other in the 18th century. So Guinan already met Picard at this stage in or 19th, the 1900s, whatever, 1800s. Yeah, 1800s, I'm sorry. In 19th century, that one. Anyway, they met each other, so Guinan should know who Picard is at this stage. They make no reference to it, and Guinan's acting like she doesn't know Picard. Well, the real answer is it's because this isn't fucking Guinan. It's just some angry other... And plus, she's like angry at the world and thinks our society is shit, which I agree, modern society, not that good. But... Again, she was all happy and calm and telling Mark Twain to, that humanity's hope and seeing the light and everything in a time where slavery had just been abolished. Like, and yet now's the time where everything's shitty. No. This episode, and it was just a terrible episode. Anyway, let's move over to... my number 5, which is Choose Your Pain from Discovery Season 1, Episode 5. So this is the episode that reintroduces Harry Mudd, a character I never liked and did not want to see return. The actor who plays him is actually, Rainn Wilson's actually better than, the original version. I will give him that, but I just hate this character. The way they introduce him out of nowhere, where he's in a prison cell and it's like talking to Lorca or whatever. It was really dumb, and I really did not care for it. However, the main reason why I hate this episode is because Saru, who's a character I would go on to like. Like, I love Saru's portrayal in Season 2, 3, and 4 of Discovery. I think he's a very interesting, drawn-out, dynamic character. But in this episode, they play him as wholly incompetent and incapable of commanding a starship when he's the first officer, as he goes and looks up names of better captains to try to figure out what to do. And more than that, more to the point... They torture a sentient being, and they kind of debate over whether or not it's sentient, and Burnham points out that it may be sentient, and his response is, I don't care, we have to torture this being in order to get the captain back, so fuck it, we'll torture this being till we kill it. That is so incredible. He should be court-martialed for that, but instead in the next episode, the Admiral doesn't complain about that at all, and in fact complains about Stamets for actually saving this being's life, which made me hate that fucking Admiral too for the rest of the show. I was actually glad when they killed her off. This is and I hate the stereotype. A lot of people say that the new Star Trek shows are not Star Trek, but this episode, the way they behave, is not Star Trek. It is not true to the Federation. It is not true to Starfleet ways, the way that they torture. And even, let's say that this is an intelligent, sentient being. It's still complete. In like the next episode, they have like them saying, oh, these Gamma Gornder space whales are an endangered species list, so we need to have to save them. Yet in this episode, there's a unique being that they just want to fucking torture and kill. And they have no qualms about this. Like, that's bullshit. So, that is why I absolutely hate this episode. Next, we'll move over to my number 4, which is Stardust City Rag, Picard Season 1, Episode 5. So, yes, I had to include an episode from Season 1 of Picard. This is another one where they had no idea what to do with the fucking tone of this episode, because it starts out as, like, with fucking Icheb, like, getting his eye ripped out, and then like 709 having the Mercy kill him, and they didn't even have the decency to cast the same actor who played each of them in Voyager, when they just sort of ceremoniously killed him off in the flashback. And so it's really dark and disturbing. And then later in the episode, you have Picard putting on a funny accent and weird outfits and going to a casino bar or whatever, going, oh, what is you doing? And like Rios with a feather in his cap going, oh my god, like, what the fuck is that shit? What? They have no idea what the tone is, and then 709 comes in with like machine phaser guns and starts blowing down people and killing people away. Like, this does not seem like, okay, I don't mind violence in Star Trek. There's always been violence in Star Trek, but it's always been like measured. It's always been in the name of good storytelling. This is just nonsense meant to look cool. And the whole episode is nonsense. Anyway, let's get to my number 3. Hide and Seek, Picard Season 2, Episode 9. Speaking of action nonsense, in this episode, the Picard and his crew has to face off against a bunch of men in the 20th century who have been co-opted by the Borg Queen and turned into some kind of Borg hybrid with machine guns, and they go around like shooting everything. And so they go around killing all these people, when just a few short episodes ago they explained how they need to curtail their impact on the timeline. They don't want to step on any butterflies, as they say, because any minor thing they might do could possibly change the future. And in this very episode, they kill about 30 people. Like, whether those people had kids, whether they had ancestors, like, that could so, it was the most careless, irresponsible use of time travel. I think it even tops a DS9 episode where Kira goes back in time to try to kill her mother for sleeping with Dukat. Like, it's one of the most, in fact, hey, maybe that's another idea for a video. I could do the top 10 most irresponsible time travel in Star Trek. This would probably be number 1. And it's just the way they portrayed Soon as a villain who just twirls his mustache and goes and has these henchmen up and come. It's all a bunch of bullshit. It's nonsense. Anyway, let's get into my number 2 worst episode of Modern Trek, and that is Farewell, Picard Season 2, Episode 10. At this stage, the Season 2 of Picard just got worse and worse and worse, and they just totally lost track of what the hell they were doing. By the time they got to this episode, it was making like zero sense. It was just any random bullshit that they would put on screen. They had the stupid drones that freaking Soon had, which is show is supposed to be taking place like 2 years from now, and yet there's this like super drone technology that with shields and shit that were like flying. Like, this isn't the fucking Marvel movie, like, I don't know, but it was flying over to like fucking try to kill Rene Picard, a character I have zero interest or attachment or care absolutely nothing about. And then they manage to save her like in the first like 5 minutes of the episode, and the rest of the episode is just like a bunch of bullshit. And Q shows up and says, when he's like so pissed off and angry, it's like, this is a penance. In the earlier season, now he shows up like, oh, I just wanted you, Picard, to find this key or whatever, and blah blah blah, and oh, I just wanted to show you that you appreciate me. Give me a hug, Picard. Like, what? What the hell is that? That's some of the worst writing, most ridiculous writing I've ever seen. Now, it may sound like a cool idea the way that the Borg Queen they introduced in the first episode turns out to be Jurati, but everyone figured that out by this stage. But more than that, like from a time travel perspective, it actually makes zero sense whatsoever, because they weren't like, how could this Born droid appear before they even time travel? Like, how they're getting their methods of time travel, type 1, type 2, like whatever happened, and a singular timeline. You know, they're getting it confused, and I fucking hate when shows cannot get their time travel logic straight. It's fine, you just need to stick to one version. But anyway, yes, the whole episode was just a giant big ball of messy bullshit. Like, who cares? Anyway, let me get into my number one worst episode of Modern Trek. Now, when I did my top 20 best episodes of Modern Trek last week, I did talk about my number one for that, and how that is probably one of my favorite Star Trek episodes of the entire franchise, and will probably make a top 20 or possibly even top 10 of my favorite episodes of all of Star Trek. Well, the same is with this episode in the opposite direction, where this episode is definitely in my top 10 of worst episodes of all of Star Trek, of the entire franchise. In fact, this might crack my top 3 of worst, and I might even put this at number 2 of worst episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise, and that is 2 of 1, Picard Season 2, Episode 6. It was the absolute worst jumping the shark moment that I can't get out of my head, is when they're at this stupid ball, which was a dumb idea to begin with. Again, it's like they try to make it like an Ocean's 11 heist thing, but they just kind of really fast tracked it and just threw them in the situation out of nowhere. It was so obvious they were just trying to be cool and hip like a heist movie. It was like so stupid. But anyway, while they're there, Jurati is being controlled by the Borg Queen, or having conversations with her in her head, and somehow convinces her to go on stage and sing as a distraction. So Jurati, manages somehow to get a spotlight person to turn all the lights off and follow the spotlight on her, and then all of a sudden the music band starts playing a song from this random stranger who wasn't even invited to the party, just shows up on stage, and apparently they know exactly what song she wants to play, and starts singing her song. And so she sings this song out of nowhere in order to distract people. Like, so how did the spotlight person know how to do that? How did the band know how to play the exact music that she needed for that song? And why the fuck would they let a random stranger on stage just to start singing this song randomly? Like, it was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like, it really tops anything that Star Trek had ever done. Like, it's just mind-boggling. It was one of the worst jumping the shark moments. Like, Picard at this point, season 2, I was starting to go downhill, but I still had hope it may turn around. But after this scene, this was the clear jumping the shark moment. This is when I knew that the rest of the season would suck. I knew there was no hope for this show whatsoever. It was one of the dumbest things I have ever seen. Ever. And then the rest of the episode's not much better, where like Soong just gets in Q's motivation, as we find out in the finale, which I talked about, is to hug Picard and show him that he appreciates him, yet he hires Soong to go and run Picard over with his car. And he's an android at this stage, which they kind of play lip service to in the next episode, but Shouldn't be being hit by a car actually do fucking nothing to him? Imagine if Data was hit by a car. What would that do to him? Fucking nothing. And why is he driving? Like, what is going on? Like, that's just what I'm asking myself. Like, what the hell kind of psychotropic drugs and bad trip were the writers having when they wrote this episode? Like, it makes no sense. It's just a giant ball of total nonsense. Anyway. That is my number one worst episode of Modern Trek 2 of 1. So that is it. That is it for my top 10 worst episodes of Modern Trek. Thanks so much for watching. And I want to re-emphasize, I am a fan of Modern Trek. Go watch my top 10 best episodes. I do think there's more bad than good. These 10 bad episodes do not represent what these shows do. Well, maybe season 2 of Picard. But other than that, they're actually pretty good. More good than bad. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out my channel as I do many more videos and many other Star Trek topics, as well as covering other shows like The Expanse, Better Call Saul, Westworld, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.